Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling. Welcome to another video where we're covering the Renegade Raiders detachment from the new Codex Chaos Space Marines, and of course we are also going to cover their one unique model here. So the Renegade Raiders very much represents the Red Corsairs in 10th edition, but of course any Legion that you play can use this detachment, which is how I like it, as I played Alpha Legion, but this detachment honestly does look pretty interesting, and I think it actually could fit with Alpha Legion pretty well. Now, the spirit of the Red Corsairs is very quick assaults. They like to use bikers a lot. Anything that allows them to move faster, they're big fans. And while they don't have any unique models except this very hideous Huron Blackheart model, you can, of course, convert him if you wanted to. But any detachment can use him, and I don't believe Huron has the keyword to make him an exclusive character, so you could bring him along with, say, Abaddon the Despoiler. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Red Corsairs and are wanting to learn, I'll give you a quick rundown. The Red Corsairs were formed by the about 200 or so remaining Astral Claws after during the Bad Ab War, and of course, Lug Huron, which is a very hard name to say, became Huron Blackheart, the leader. And over time, they've absorbed many Renegade Space Marines and Renegade Space Marine chapters to the point where they're now at the size of a pre-heresy legion, pretty much. They are huge. And their color scheme, while it does vary from Corsair to Corsair, it's usually red, black, and the trim is where it varies. Usually you'll see black on the limbs and gold on the head, backpack, and torso, but it varies. Some people have the gold on both anything above the waist, or some have it all over. People like Huron, of course, they're special. He is the Lord of the Red Corsairs, even though there are so many of them. Obviously, there's other lords in the warband. So let's get into the Renegade Raiders, starting with their detachment ability. It's very simple but very powerful. Ranged weapons gain assault for Heretic Astartes models, and when you attack someone, if they're on an objective, you increase the AP of that attack by 1, which is super useful, especially for low AP things, but also high AP things to defeat things that rely on their armor save, like, say, Sisters. Your Astartes Chainswords will be at AP 2, your Cursed Weapons, AP 3, stuff like that. This is very useful and is very thematic, as the objectives are supposed to represent something your force wants, and the Corsairs are, of course, going to be very savage when they're going after something they want and there's enemies on it. This, of course, allows them to play the objective game even better than any other Chaos Space Marines, and makes them very difficult to take off of objectives, because if they position right, you'll never be fighting them in melee with them not having the buff. Or at shooting, of course, that's a different story entirely, but they could be in cover, and they are relatively tough. They are Space Marines, after all. In terms of enhancements, they have the standard 4. We'll start with Despot's Claim, which is 15 points, and at the start of the command phase, you roll a d6. On a 5+, you gain 1 CP. If this model is wholly within 12 inches of the opponent's deployment zone, add 1 to the result of the roll. Dread Reaver is 15 points. While the bearer is within 12 inches of the opponent's deployment zone, when the bearer makes a melee attack, you can reroll the hit roll and the wound roll. Mark of the Hound is 25 points and is the most expensive, but it is very powerful, where the bearer's unit gains Scout 6 inches. And Tyrant's Lash is overpriced at 20 points, but allows you to reroll advances, and you can fall back and shoot. Useful enough for Chosen, but overall probably too expensive to really be taken. Let's review each of them and what they'd be good for. Despot's Claim is, of course, handy if you're not bringing along, say, Abaddon, and even if you are, his chance to generate a CP isn't quite as high as it used to be, so this can still have some use there. Though this would probably be best used on something aggressive, the 5+ chance isn't horrific, and you're likely to generate 1 or 2 CP throughout an entire game, so for a character sitting on the backfield, it's not horrible, and is only 15 points, so even if it generates only 1 command point, it easily made its points back, given how powerful the stratagems are, which we'll get into soon. Dread Reaver is very good on any character, of course, that likes to be aggressive, which are most Chaos Space Marine characters. I'd say it's probably at its best on a Winged Demon Prince, given their fast movement and rather brutal melee, though it is also really good on anything with devastating wounds, like a Chaos Lord's Demon Hammer. That is a very powerful ability to have when you have devastating wounds and damage 3. Mark of the Hound is at 25 points, very pricey, but I think can be built around. A unit gaining Scout 6 inches is really meaningful for just about any sort of Chaos damage dealer. Terminators will love it, as they naturally move slow. Chosen will love it, as they get to advance and charge, and Possessed will love it, because they already move super fast, opening up some possibility for first-turn charges, especially against an opponent that deployed aggressively. And then Tyrant's Lash is probably about 10 points too expensive, as it's really only useful for things that can advance in charge, which they do have a stratagem for that, but that costs a CP and isn't always going to be available. In general, I'd say that it probably needs to be, as I said, 10 points cheaper, and the fallback and shoot is nice, but you're probably going to be using these advances mainly on melee units, even though everything gains advance. Things that want to be in melee generally don't really have the shooting to be worth it, and the units that are shooting, for example, a Forge Fiend, is not likely to get charged, and also couldn't gain the benefit of this. I suppose if you were building around Havocs, if you had a Warpsmith with this, that could give them some insurance, but that seems like a very strange build to me. So regardless, I'd say Dreadreaver, Despot's Claim, and Mark of the Hound are all very powerful, and Tyrant's Lash is more so-so than the others. In terms of stratagems, we have Unfailingly Obdurate, which is a very obtuse way of saying Armor of Contempt. It is a battle tactic. You can use it for free, and when you're shot at, you can reduce the AP of incoming attacks by 1. Of course, Terminators will love this. Anything at cover will love this. It's very handy to have to keep your units safe at range. Scour and Seize is rather niche. It is a battle tactic, which does give it some use at least. Each time your unit attacks an enemy unit on an objective, melee weapons gain precision. This could be useful if you desperately need to snipe out a character, or something similar. And then Opportunistic Raiders is at 1 CP. At the end of the fight phase, select one unit not in engagement range that was eligible to fight. It can make a normal move of 6 inches or 12 inches if mounted. It cannot embark in a transport if it disembarked this turn. This is very useful for general board control, and I believe you would have to wipe a unit to be able to use it, though, which isn't exactly ideal. However, it's not the end of the world, especially if you're using this on bikers who like to maraud lighter infantry and are very good against them. Warp Charged Engines is for 1 CP. One mounted or transport unit can auto-advance 6 inches. A fine enough buff, though it would only really need this if you desperately need that to get onto an objective, but it is very useful to have in the back pocket for that kind of situation. Ruinous Raid is perhaps the strongest stratagem here. One unit that disembarked that hasn't shot or fought yet this turn. When they make attacks, they can reroll the hit roll and wound roll if the target is on an objective. This has a lot of potential, not only for melee, but for shooting units. For example, you could load up a Rhino full of 10 Havocs with las cannons. They disembark once they see a target on a objective that they need to take off, and with rerolling all hits and wounds, they are extremely likely to not only hit a lot of normal hits, but 6s for their dark packs, and rerolling the wound roll makes las cannons terrifyingly efficient, given how well they wound everything in the game. Of course, in melee, Chosen, with a Lord attached, would really love this, and so would just about any sort of melee unit that you could put in a transport, which is most of them. And of course, it also just leans more so into wanting to use some transports in this. Then we have Reaver's Haste, which is 1 CP. One infantry or mounted unit is eligible to declare a turn in which they advance if they target an enemy on an objective at 1 of the charge roll. This is a pretty handy one to have. It's not a battle tactic, but still, advance and charge on demand is very useful. And the +1 to charge, I don't believe you need to have made an advance to do, so it could be useful out of Deep Strike. Say you Deep Strike in some Terminators, you could get a 8-inch charge, which is not a huge improvement. It's a large improvement over 9 inches, but if you desperately need to make that charge, this could definitely be worth it. And if you have some CP going on the side, an 8-inch charge re-rolling is pretty likely to happen. I think out of these, obviously, Armor of Contempt is very good. Opportunistic Raiders, very powerful. Ruinous Raid and Reaver's Haste are all very good. And Scour and Seize is niche, and Warp Charge Engine is also niche, but they're both useful to have in those situations where you desperately need them. And those moments may not seem common, but every so often, having the ability to auto-advance 6 inches can be a real lifesaver in case you, say, need to get to an objective, and then that advance roll comes out as a dreaded 1. Or if there's a super dangerous character and their bodyguard is too beefy, you could try and snipe them out, which would actually be rather helpful against mirror matches if they have someone like Abaddon inside a Terminator unit, as you likely won't be able to chew through all those wounds and kill Abaddon. That's all of it for the Renegade Raiders rules. Now we're going to cover the Lord of the Red Corsairs himself in Huron Blackheart with this snazzy third-party model on the right for the Corsair Lord, totally unrelated. He has the standard Marine sort of character stat spread, totally blanked out there. It is movement 6 inches, toughness 4, 3 plus save, a 5 wounds, leadership 6 plus, and OC 1. He has a flamer style attack at range that is strength 6 AP 1 and damage 1, which would really enjoy the extra AP. Then it has 2 melee weapons. He has 2 melee weapons. The cursed weapon, or I think it's technically an exalted weapon, but 6 attacks, hitting on 2, strength 5, AP 2, and damage 2. A fairly competent anti-marine profile, and then the Tyrant's Claws with a ridiculous 10 attacks at strength 4, AP 2, damage 1. Good for clearing out hordes. He has 3 unit abilities. One of them is the Tyrant of Badab, which adds 1 of the to the OC of any unit he leads. Red Corsairs allows you to redeploy up to 3 Heretic Astartes, and they can be placed into strategic reserves. And then the Hamadrya's Knowledge, which is the little dog thing that he has with him, which is once per game when an enemy moves within 9 inches, move d6 inches. I'd say that while he offers an interesting sort of selection of rules, overall he's probably a secondary pick to a Lord, and at 80 points it's really not that much to upgrade to a Lord. I think his Red Corsair's ability arguably works better in the Deceptor's Detachment, and his melee is rather laughable for a Chaos Space Marine character. The anti-horde mode is handy, but generally Chaos Marines don't struggle with that, given the fact that most of them use accursed weapons or similar to get a lot of attacks that are very good at killing infantry, and he doesn't really help the squad punch up against heavy things. He more so just adds more to what they already do well against already. He also doesn't have the Lord benefits of the Rage mode or giving free stratagems. However, I think he would be very useful in the hands of a skilled player, much more so than a beginner or someone that's slightly more casual, like 95% of players are. Overall, I'd say he probably is on like the edge of viability. He can lead anything a normal Lord can, but overall I'd say he's secondary to a Lord. He doesn't have the punch, he doesn't have the free stratagems, and while his redeploy is nice, his other abilities are just rather weak. Chaos Space Marines generally don't want to run away from enemies, they want to get close to them, and while the Hamadrya can be used to do that, it's once per game. If it was once per battle round, I think it would be much better. Overall, he's fine. I wouldn't say anything more than that. If you really want to bring him, go ahead. I don't think it's a bad choice. I just think there's better choices out there. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.